Okay, so we're talking about 2 Corinthians 11, 3 through 16. And this is a passage that I got excited about once I began to understand what he was really talking about, because it was a bit confusing when I thought it was about head coverings. But when you look at the context, when you look at the general teaching of Paul, and you look at these things, you begin to see that he's talking um, not quite in parables, but he's using the symbolism of the Mosaic law to bring us into the law of Christ, which is that the man and the woman honor each other in Christ, and that they both honor Christ. And if you look at this passage carefully, you can see that it's not a matter of one lording over the other or trumping the other per se. It's not a matter of domination, but it's a matter of how they approach life together as a married couple. And in discussing this with my wife, it was, it's hard to explain and it's hard to understand. And 1 Peter 3:7 came up. 1 Peter 3:7 is a really cool verse. Husbands, likewise, live according to knowledge with your wives as with a weaker vessel, being the woman, rendering honor also as joint heirs of the grace of life, so as for not to be hindered the prayers of you. Reading that from an interlinear, it helps a little bit, and that's what I had in front of me at the moment. But it's a little baffling at first, because he seems to be calling the wives something kind of insulting or putting them down a bit, and at the same time telling the husband to honor them. Well, something doesn't add up. Well, that's because this was translated from the Greek, and Peter most likely wrote it in the Aramaic. And you got to remember, Peter was a fisherman, and he spoke in those terms a lot of times, because that's what he intuitively understood. And translated from the Aramaic, we see that the weaker vessel is not something necessarily inferior per se, but it spoke of something like outrigging on a boat. It lended stability to the boat, and it was incredibly valuable, and it was indispensable, and you would not want to do without it, especially you would not want to go through a storm or any rough waves without it. And so 1 Peter 3:7 and 1 Corinthians 11, 3 through 11 speak of essentially the same sort of concept here. That if you put 1 Corinthians 11, 3 through 16 in sailing terms, part of the concept given there could be expressed that Christ is like the captain of the ship, and the man is not to subdue the will of Christ or to cover his glory with what he wants. The boat is to go where the captain leads the ship to go. And so in prayer and fasting, the husband or the man is not to cover his head. He's not to try to control it or make it conform to a pattern, but to go where the captain says to go. And yet the wife, ironically, has something of an inverse relationship to that, where the wind and the waves are trying to buffet the boat and to uncover it and to shame it and to conceal God's glory and to pull the boat off of course. The woman's job is to cover her husband in prayer and in prophecy, and to make sure that he is under proper control of Christ. And so they work together. You don't isolate them. You don't consider one to be more important than the other. They're all part of the same vessel. And so when you take this approach to marriage, when you understand this, all these things that husbands and wives go through makes a lot more sense when you realize that the storms that seem to come from within each of you are not to be used against each other. And so, right back to what was previously said, you have to agree to fight for your marriage, not inside of your marriage. Hopefully that makes sense. That's what I have for now. Shalom, shalom. Be blessed.
We'd love to hear from you. Please write to us at disciplesofcana@gmail.com.